I'm so excited to share some fall craft ideas with you. They are sure to get you inspired. There's over 15 craft ideas for you to check out. Let's get started. I found this absolutely gorgeous fabric at the thrift store for 50 cents, along with this amazing wood frame for $3. And you can see it is a substantial frame. I wanted to remove that inner portion there. It was like a mat, and I didn't like the way it looked. I thought it took away from the rustic look of the frame. So I'm just going to be pulling out the staples that they had there so I can remove it. I just used my needle nose pliers and just kind of wiggled things around until it came loose. Decided that I would set that aside and hopefully be able to use that for a later project. But you can see how much better that looks. I did use this inner portion as my template to create an insert for my frame. This is some foam board that I picked up from Dollar Tree. You can get that anywhere. I've seen it at Walmart and other dollar stores as well. So now I just traced around it, and then I'm using my craft knife to cut it out. Please be careful that you don't cut your surface like I did. Definitely use a nice flat sturdy board to cut this out. You can see how well that fits now. Next, I just needed to dust this frame a bit, so I have a rag and I just misted it with some water, and I'm just gently removing any of the dust that remained on the frame. You can see how gross that was. So I needed to iron the fabric as well. I've just got my Cricut craft mat, my spray bottle, and an iron, and I'm just going to remove those wrinkles, and it came out very, very easily. I do believe this fabric is made of cotton. So I'm not going to make this project permanent. All I want to do is figure out the placement of my fabric on this foam board, and I'm just going to gently tack it down with a little bit of some double-sided tape. This is not the strongest tape, so I felt safe enough to use that for this fabric. I'm wrapping the foam board with the fabric, and I'm going to be using some washi tape just to tack it down into place. Again, washi tape is low tack, so I wasn't concerned about it coming apart. But if you do want to make this a permanent thing, then I would probably be using some spray glue on the foam board and then placing my fabric into place. So I'm just going to continue to wrap my foam board with the tape, and then I am going to just flip it around just to make sure it looks good, and it does. And I'm going to just continue on as needed. Okay, so once you have the fabric in place, you can press that down into your frame, and then you can just continue to tack it down where you need any of the tape if your fabric is lifting anyway. I did not hot glue this into place. Like I said, I want to be able to reuse this frame for a later project, or perhaps use the fabric again for a later project. But this is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. I found this really fun ramikin at the thrift store for $2.49. Absolutely love the pattern on it. Knew it would be perfect for a fall DIY project. I got this candle from Dollar Tree. It is a vanilla scented candle. I'm just going to be removing the packaging for it because I needed to melt it down. I'm going to remove the label on the bottom and then pull out the wick from the candle. We are going to be reusing that wick. So I've got a pot with some water in it already. I've got a can here, and I squeezed the one end of the can so I had a pouring spout. And you can see I don't have a whole lot of water in there, just enough so it will start to melt. It took about a half an hour to melt this candle down, and I have to say it smelled amazing while that was happening. Once melted, I am just going to wipe the tin down with a cloth. I didn't want any water in with my wax. Now at this point, I should have wrapped my wick around a bamboo skewer, but I got so excited to get on this, I just decided to just go ahead and pour this. You can see I am doing this on a craft mat as well. And then I'm like, why is this wick not sitting up straight? I'm like, oh shoot, right. I needed a bamboo skewer. So I took two of the bamboo skewers and I pushed them together, and the wick stuck to those 2 bamboo skewers. The candle didn't take a whole lot of time to set up because I think the ramekin was cool when I poured it. I thought this would be perfect for a little candle holder. I trimmed it off, and this project could not be any easier. I think a fall scented candle would be beautiful in here as well. I love this. Let me know what you think. I've been finding a lot of really beautiful and unique wood frames at the thrift store. This one was $2.99. I love the way it looked. I've got this scrapbook paper here, and I'm just trying to figure out the pattern I want to use in the frame. I'm using the glass as my template, so I get the exact size I need to fit within my frame. Just using a ruler just to butt the glass right up to the edge so I don't have to waste any of that paper. I traced around the glass, and I'm just going to use my scissors to cut this out. I am going to be reusing the glass and the insert of this frame, but I put my paper face down first, and then I put my other things in place and put all the tabs back, and you can see how beautiful that looks. I have these Dollar Tree fall stickers that I picked up, I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before. And I love these because they're dimensional, and they got some different colored pumpkins. I'm just trimming them around before I put them into place because I like to figure out my placement first. I decided to use these green ones on here. I kind of wish I would have maybe gone with the orange ones because then they would have stood out a little bit more. But we're just going to stick with what I've got going on here. All right, so I am now going to remove the sticker paper, like the backing paper. I'm going to gently put them in place before I fully commit, and then I will be pressing them into place. Aren't these pretty? I think Dollar Tree has got some absolutely gorgeous stickers. Let me know the stickers that you found there lately. I have not been to Dollar Tree lately, and I'm kind of missing out. So anyway, so once you're happy with the sticker placement, then you can definitely push it down and smooth it out. I love that, but I felt like it was still missing a little bit, so I had this scrapbook paper that had tags all over it, and I happened to find one that said grateful on it. So I'm just going to trim that down to size so it will fit on my frame a little bit better. I'm going to edge the edges of the paper with some vintage photo distress oxide ink. I'm using a makeup sponge. This is optional. I just like the way that looks. It just helps the word to stand out just a little bit more. And then I'm going to be using some dimensional foam tape here. I happen to have some that's the width that I need for my word. So I'm just going to put that into place, trim it down, and it happens to be the same height as the pumpkin stickers, which I thought was really cool. So I'm just going to remove the backing and then press that into place. To say this project was so easy, but I absolutely love how it turned out. Let me know what you think. So I didn't pick this one up from the thrift store. I had it since we were married, but it's got a crack in it and a chip in it. I've also seen jugs like this at the thrift stores tons of time. I'm giving it 3 coats of heirloom white Rust-Oleum matte spray. Actually, it said it was satin, but it does turn a little bit more matte than satin. I'm cleaning it with some rubbing alcohol because there was a bit of dirt on the exterior, and that'll just help the spray paint to adhere better. I also cleaned out the inside. There was a lot of debris in there as well. While that was drying outside after I spray painted it, I am going to be using this absolutely gorgeous mushroom napkin that I picked up from a store called Ninny's Napkins. It's an online craft store. I don't know if they still have this particular napkin or not, but I love it. I removed the backing with some tape. And now for a little trick here. I know you've probably all seen this before, but you want to use a thin paintbrush and some water, and then you want to trace around your image with that paintbrush, and that will create a nice line for you to tear out your image. This is something I never used to do, and I can't remember who I learned this from, but I see lots of YouTubers doing it now, crafty YouTubers, and it makes it so much easier to get this out. It beats using scissors, because what ends up happening is that the edges just kind of blend in with the background once you decoupage it into place. So you can see how easy it is to tear it away as well. Works out great. So you can tear out 2 of these patterns if you like. I'm just going to be using 1 for my project here. You can see how nicely it covered the pot here, but I accidentally got a little too close and I have some drip marks and the chip and the crack still show. So I decided to use this beautiful tissue paper that I had in my stash. It's got so much texture to it, and I thought it would create a really interesting texture on the jug. So I'm using a soft bristle brush and some matte decoupage glue. You can use Mod Podge if you'd like. I'm just using the, I think it's the Craft Mind brand. I can't remember. Craft Smart brand. I can't remember what it was called. Anyways, I put a coat of the decoupage glue on the jug, and now I'm going to put my tissue into place and add a layer of the glue over top. It's super important that you use a soft brush because this tissue is quite delicate. It has a lot of different natural fibers in it. So I thought it was perfect for kind of like a nature inspired jug look. In the end, actually, what ended up happening is it created a bit more of a ceramic look. So like a pottery look, which I thought was interesting. And of course, I love the look of pottery. So I'm just going to continue to apply the tissue until I've got the jug fully covered. I did take some stops once in a while. I would let the tissue dry before I moved on to, say, the bottom or the handle. And that just prevented me from like making a mess of the work that I've already achieved. I just continued to work on it. I needed to do the handles still. So I just used some little pieces here and tore them down to a more easily workable size and continued to work on the jug until I got a look, again, I was happy with. Okay, so my jug is all nice and dry. You can see the absolutely gorgeous texture that it has. So I'm just going to stabilize my jug here. I used a paint roll and a tin can, and now I'm going to apply the mushroom napkin piece that I have here. So I'm just figuring out my placement first. And I only wanted to use this on one side because I wanted the option of being able to use this jug any time of year. So I left the other side blank. Once you have the placement figured out, put a little bit of decoupage glue down, and then I'm just going to slowly work my way. I was being careful. I didn't want to get too many creases in this. And since there was a bit of like a curve to the jug, I knew I could chance getting wrinkles. So I was just being very careful, slowly working on it until I had it fully covered. But isn't this cute? While I was letting that dry, I grabbed some florals here and some leaves. I got some from Michael's, and I had some stuff left over my stash, forage branches, and some grasses that I picked out in my garden. I love to mix natural elements in with some faux greens and leaves. I just feel like it just really enhances a faux bouquet. So what I'm going to do is just trim my wires down, and then I'm not going to cut these down. I'm just going to weave them in together. This is something I always do. And that way here, I can use these all at a later date. So now you can see I'm just layering in some branches and some grasses. So funny thing, while I was working on this, my power went out. So if the lighting seems a little bit funny than usual, that's because I was using my battery packs to run my light so I could get this project done for you. Unfortunately, there was a power line went down somewhere, And I thought that maybe it was due to the forest fire that's in around my area. I was kind of freaking out, admittedly, but thankfully it wasn't that. I was able to get this done for you, thankfully. Okay, so once you've got a bouquet that you like, you can trim things down. The wires, I just bent them up. Again, like I said, I want to be able to reuse these later on, so I didn't want to cut them down too much. I'm also trimming down the branches and more grasses. Pull things, move things around. A lot of these are wire, so once you have a really beautiful bouquet, put it in your jug and then it's ready for display. I can't tell you how much I love this project. I am so happy with how it turned out. Let me know what you think down below. I've got this beautiful rusty old tin. I actually rusted this myself. I have a tutorial on how you can do that. I will have the video for you down in the description box, or feel free to ask me in the comments section. I've got some scrap cotton fabric and some cheesecloth that have been coffee dyed. I also have this strip of some cardstock in a natural color. I wanted to create a ring that is just slightly bigger than the top of my can, as I wanted to create a lid that I could remove, and I wasn't exactly sure how to go about this, so I thought that this would probably be the easiest way. I removed the excess, and now I'm going to glue those two pieces together, or the two ends together, and then you're going to see that it just slips over the can, and yes, it's loose, but that's what I had wanted. So I'm setting that aside, and now I am going to select what side I want to work on for my tin. I'm stabilizing the tin using just a few pieces here. And then I'm going to take this cotton fabric that again is coffee dyed, and I'm going to cut it down. I just add a little slit with my scissors and then I tear it because I want that really pretty rustic frayed edge. Now, again, I do have some videos on how you can coffee dye your fabric. You can even coffee dye paper. So I will have the tutorial for you down again in the description box below. Next, you're going to want to use some rub-on transfers. So these ones are from Dollar Tree, and so are these ones. You want to select something that is going to suit your crafting and decor needs. I have got these particular ones. I don't even remember where I picked them up. Might have been from Amazon. I'm not 100% sure. I've had them in my stash for quite a while, so we'll see how well they work. I really like this right here. It says Vintage Market. You can see how there are so many different designs on this sheet. So I'm using a craft knife and gently just cutting it out around the Vintage Market logo. And then I can still have all the rest of this sheet to use for some other projects. So just so you know too, I had a quick look on Amazon and there's lots of rub-on transfers to select from there as well. So my fabric piece was a little too big for my Vintage Market logo, so I'm just going to cut it down to size, remove any of the excess fibers, and if you need to remove a few more just to create a nice frayed edge, just go ahead and do that as well, like I just did. I like the way that looks a whole lot better. So to apply the fabric to the can, I'm using some matte decoupage glue. Feel free to use any brand of some decoupage glue that you really like. I'm leaving the fabric into place on the can, and then I'm being careful just to get the glue right underneath that fabric piece. I don't want to coat my entire can with the decoupage glue because it will change the appearance of the can. Feel free to cover the whole piece if you'd like. It will stop it from continuing to rust because the technique that I did on here will cause it to continue to rust. And also, if you cover it with some decoupage glue, I do believe it will kind of create a waxy look, which is something that is a vintage look. They did that back in the day to help seal things up. So I finished decoupaging my fabric in place. And now I decided while the glue was still wet to put my vintage label into place to see if I could get it to transfer into the glue while it was wet. I'm using my craft stick here just to rub onto the transfer, and it didn't work. So I'm like, well, it's gonna end up wrecking if I don't put it back and I'll just allow it to dry. So I went ahead and did that. I thought worst case scenario, I could just leave the paper intact and it will kind of create an old look. But I'll show you that here in a moment. In the meantime, while that is drying, I'm cutting some cheesecloth that I had coffee dyed as well. I'm cutting it down and I'm going to layer about 4 pieces on top of each other, but I just needed to just get a rough size here for the top of my tin. And like I said, I do layer all the 4 pieces on top of each other. Now that I have all my pieces, I'm going to take that cardstock circle that I had created, place it in the center of the cheesecloth, and now I'm adding hot glue on the edge and lifting the cheesecloth and pressing it into the glue. Now I am being careful not to burn my fingers, but the glue will seep through the layers of the cheesecloth and help hold it all together. So I'm just going to continue to go around with my hot glue, lifting the edges of the fabric into place around the cardboard circle. You can see I created a lid with just doing that, and it works actually quite well. I wanted to be able to use this tin to store some things in it, so that's why I chose to create a lid. But if you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. I would just glue the cheesecloth directly to the tin. To help stabilize everything and also add a decorative touch, I decided to add some simple jute twine. I just wrapped it around a few times and then tied it off with a simple knot. You can remove the tails of your knot, shorten them a bit, or leave them long, whichever look you like. I prefer to shorten mine just a little bit. I do end up trimming off some of the cheesecloth a little bit later here. And before I do all that though, I decided I'm going to glue the string into place by just adding a little bit of hot glue here and there, and that helped to stabilize that string in place. I love how this looks, it's so cool. So I tested out the rub-on transfer again, and this time the transfer held in place. Now you can see some of it did kind of lift off a little bit, but I think that's just because these transfers are old, but this actually worked quite well. And actually some of the wax that was on the paper actually got left behind as well. So I didn't quite like how that looked. So I'm going over the entire label again with some decoupage glue, and that helped to blend out that waxy texture that was left behind from the transfer. I don't think you can get any more rustic than this. I love how it turned out. Dollar Tree has these beautiful glass plates. They're nice and simple, and the label comes off so easily. So I'm just going to peel that off, and no residue was left behind. But you can clean it off with a little bit of vinegar and water if you'd like. Again, I'm going to be using these rub-on transfers that I have in my stash. This time, this one's a bit more of a botanical and like critters and fruit and vegetables. I selected this owl out of all the images. I thought it would look so cool on the plate. So again, I'm just using my craft knife and I'm carefully cutting around the owl. So I'm leaving all the other images available for me to use for future projects. So once you have your image selected, I'm going to flip my transfer upside down onto the back side of the plate. I'm going to just make sure it's centered before I carry on. I like the way that looks. So now I'm going to tape it into place. Now my transfer does have a little bit of a waxy texture, so the tape didn't stick down the best, but it did the trick for my needs. Added a little bit here, and I'm going to pull the transfer a little bit tight just to make sure it's laying nice and flat against the glass. So I did add tape all the way around the edge. Now I'm taking my craft stick and I'm going to rub it over the image until you can see that there's a bit of a cloudy look to the backside of the transfer. That means that the transfer has rubbed onto the surface that you are applying this to. Now these transfers, as I had mentioned before, are a little old, so I did notice that not all of the transfer was adhering to the glass plate. And I knew that was a bit of a risk, but I just continued to work on it. And I thought, if anything, it would just create kind of an aged look, which is kind of the look I'm wanting to go for anyway. So I'll just continue to work on the owl, remove all the tape. You can see here, the center, there was a little bit left, but it wasn't to the point that it was affecting the way the owl looked. So now I've got this nice natural cotton fabric. It's a thinner fabric. It's actually an old sheet. I'm going to be using my decoupage glue on the back side of the plate. Starting with the flat side, I'm being generous with the amount of decoupage glue that I am using because the fabric is actually going to absorb quite a bit. I also found that it was easiest if I used a thinner fabric such as this. I found that then the fabric actually didn't wrinkle as I was applying it to the plate. Once this is in place, I'm now going to go over the entire piece with decoupage over top, again being very generous. There were a few spots, as I discovered after it had dried, where I didn't apply enough glue, and it definitely makes a difference. So make sure you're generous with your glue. I'm going to go ahead now and just continue to add my glue and then seal it all up. So I'm going to set this aside and allow it to dry well before I trim off any of the excess. But you can see there's a few spots where I did not add enough glue, and it definitely kind of gives an odd look on the back side, but it looked okay on the front side. Now I'm just going to use my craft knife and I'm going to go around the edge of my plate and cut off all that extra fabric. Once you have all that excess removed, you can go around the edge and use some scissors and just cut off any little bits of fiber that might still be remaining. I'm adding a bit of decoupage glue to a little container, and then I'm going to be mixing in some water. It's about 2 parts glue to 1 part water. Mixing that together, and then I'm going to go over the fabric again. I'm hoping that I can get rid of that odd texture or look where the fabric didn't fully adhere to the plate. I'm just lifting up any edges here that may not be sticking down and adding some glue underneath. As this dries, it is going to have a bit of a translucent look, so you can seal it up. I'm also going to seal it with some clear spray or varnish, but you can see how beautiful this looks. I love how it turned out. I had all these strips of fabric left over from some previous projects, and I wanted to try and use a bunch of them up. Also have this branch. I'm just going to cut it down to length. And then I also have some jute twine. So I'm just going to go ahead and just use my snips to cut my branch down. For my jute twine, I'm going to just measure a piece out, and I'm forming a loop. And I wanted to just loosely tie it on the one end so I know how long I want my loop to be. And then I'm going to just go ahead and just cut the string. That way here, I know I have exactly the amount that I need and I have the look that I'm going to be going for. With my scraps, you just need a nice long piece, and you want an assortment of some textures and some patterns. One thing I will say is that for this, the thinner the fabric, the easier it is to tie it onto your string. So you want to bend your strip in half or fold it in half. This is a thicker piece and I did end up struggling with it. put the loop on one side and then pull those two tails through your loop, and that will tie it around your string. I'm going to pull that tight, and I've got another nice thin strip here. And again, like I said, it works way better. Fold the fabric in half and then pull those tails through on the other side of your twine. So once you've got it all nice and filled up here, you can go ahead and move the knotted fabric, along the string until you've got it roughly in the middle, because we need to tie this onto our branch. I also wanted to add another decorative touch. So I have some natural wood beads. I'm going to put those onto the end. You can add a little bit of glue onto the end of your string to help you just thread your beads onto your string. You can also add a bead in between each of your knots of fabric as you're tying your fabric onto the string. That's a really pretty touch as well. I just wanted to have some of these beads on the end. I also want to mention that I did remove that thicker fabric that I had used. I just didn't like the way it looked, and I was struggling with getting that tied on as well, so I just decided to get rid of it. I'm going to now tie the one end of our string onto my branch, and I'm just going to do a basic knot. And then I'm going to go ahead and tie the other side onto the branch as well. And feel free to move anything around as needed to make it easier for you to apply the string onto your branch. I wanted to create a hanger for this piece, so I'm just using my jute twine again. I'm tying it on to the other end, and then I'm going to create again a loop for my hanger and tying it on to the opposite end. Before I carry on, I decided I wanted to trim off the excess little bits that are on the end. I tried to tear them off, but I struggled with that a little bit, so I just went ahead and used my scissors and trimmed off the excess. Now you can see I'm just checking to make sure that this is hanging properly, and now I'm going to go in and add a little bit of hot glue to help stabilize those knots and also stabilize the strings on my branch. That will help to keep it hanging properly. I'm also going to be trimming off the excess string, and I'm going to add some hot glue on all the knots to make sure it all holds together and does not fall apart on me. This was an amazing piece to use up all those strips of fabric that I had. I love how it turned out. So for this one, I'm going to start off with an old sweater sleeve. I'm just going to cut it down to size a bit here, and I'm going to set all my scraps aside for some future projects. I also have this other piece here. I wanted to use the buttons, and I'm also going to use some of the other scraps, which I will show you in a minute. But first I needed to just cut those buttons off and then set those aside. And then I'm going to be going back to the sleeve. I wanted to cut that cuff off and also cut off some of the excess. I don't need it to be this big. I'm going to be using that cuff for another project. I turned the sleeve inside out, and now I'm going to just, again, like I said, trim this down. I don't want this to be too bulky at the bottom. I also trimmed it off on the bottom to give it more of a rounded look. At this point here, I just kind of cut the corners off, but later on you'll see me trimming it down even more. I'm taking my Sharpie and I'm going to create kind of just a half circle here. So what I am going to be doing is creating a sweater owl. I had seen it all over Pinterest and some other websites, and I loved the look of it. I thought it would be a really easy and fun craft to make for the fall season. I'm just pulling the sweater sleeve just to create a bit more of an even look. I'm going to use hot glue just to seal all my seams together. So I'm just going to start off at the top. I'm being very gentle with how I apply it. I didn't want to make it too gloppy, however you want to say it. I didn't want to go too heavy-handed with the glue. So here you can see now I am rounding off the bottom some more. I had tested it out with some stuffing and it wasn't sitting properly and it looked kind of lopsided. So I'm like, okay, the only way I can fix that is to trim off the excess. So I went ahead and did that and created a rounded bottom, and it worked a lot better. I'm going to start closing the bottom off as well, but you want to make sure you leave a portion of it open so then you can turn it the right way around, and also it gives you a spot to stuff it. So I'm just going to go ahead again using my hot glue. You could stitch this if you want. I'm not a good sewer, so I'm just using hot glue. So once you're happy with that, you're going to turn it inside out. No, sorry, turn it the right way around so it's facing the correct way. And I'm focusing on the pointy tips to make sure that they are nice and pointy, and then you can stuff it. So I'm using stuffing that I had on hand. It was a big, huge bag that I had for another project, but you could definitely use some pillows. It's a really inexpensive way to use stuffing, or I've even heard people use some old pillows. That would work as well. Once you've got it stuffed the way you like, you can see it's not going to sit right. So I'm going to use some rocks and I'm going to put them in a little baggie here. This is something that I did when I made gnomes. What it does is makes it so much easier to sit on a shelf because it's weighted on the bottom. But I didn't want my rocks to fall all over the place in the owl since I'm closing it up on the bottom. And I didn't want my rocks to fall out, so that's why I decided to use a bag. And I made the mistake here. I decided to add some fluff, which I'll show you in a moment here. What I did is just turn my seams inward, the edges of the opening inward. I created a seam, and then I added just a bit of hot glue, pinched that together, and that closed it up. So here I'm adding some more stuffing, and I should not have done that because then it didn't end up sitting quite right. I struggled a little bit, but I didn't have everything attached in place. So I was able to move things around once it was all sealed up, and then it was sitting better. I'm glad I did put the rocks in there because it definitely helped. So now I'm going to work on the face. So I'm going to use this brown scrap of some sweater, and I really like the different little flecks here. I am going to be using this to create the beak. I'm just creating just a basic triangle shape, and then you can just cut it the way you need it to fit the size of your owl. I don't have any specific dimensions for this owl. I just kind of wung it, which is what I normally do. I'm using this off-white sweater piece, and that's what I'm going to use for my eyes as well as the button. If you have a look at owls, you'll see that there is a definition around the eye where the feathers are a different color. So that's what this light cream colored piece is. And then the eye, of course, in the center for the actual eyeball. So now I'm going to just place everything. I've got 2 of the cream circle pieces and then the beak. And I wanted wings as well. So I wanted to use this texture piece here that I'm cutting out. And then I'm just going to cut it into kind of an oblong oval shape. And I also took advantage of the fact that there's some texture on there. So I cut around that as well, just to create some interest to the wings. So of course I cut 2 wings as well, and then I'm going to be using some hot glue as well to attach them. You could add some stitching before you close up your owl if you want on the belly portion. I didn't bother to do that. I'm trying to keep this project as simple as possible. So once you've got everything laid out and figured out where you want it to go, you can just start to glue everything into place. I'm just going to trim the beak a little bit because it wasn't fitting around the eyes, so I just trimmed that up a little. And once I've got all that into place, I am then going to go ahead and attach the eyes as well. Another little touch you could add is some stitching through the buttonholes as well if you choose to. So I put the wings in place and I kind of wish I attached them just a little bit lower. I thought it looked a little bit out of proportion, but hey, that's okay. I still think this little guy turned out really well. It was such an easy project. I love how it turned out. This is going to be a quick and easy one. You're going to be using the cuffs from the sleeves of sweaters. I'm trimming off any of the excess. I don't need this little piece here, so I'm going to just get rid of that. But if you want to keep that on, that's totally fine. I need these pieces to be approximately 1.5 inches in width. I'm using some fabric glue, and at this point I should have added a little bit of water to the glue. That would help it to soak into the fibers. I'm using this to prevent this from fraying, and using fabric glue, it dries clear and it's washable, and it is also flexible once dry. I'm also cutting these down so that they are the right length. I want them to be all approximately the same, so I'm just trimming those excess off, and then I am going to create a little tube. So you could use some paper towel tubing or whatever. I just decided that I'm gonna just keep it as is. I wanted it to be a little bit more natural, I guess, so that they actually look a bit like a sweater here, not so structured. So yes, I am actually creating some napkin rings. I again had seen this a lot on Pinterest and other places, and I wanted to create some because it was such an easy project and a great way to use up these little scraps. So I created the loop, glued it together with some hot glue, and then again, just using some fabric glue to seal off any of the edges. I'm going to set them aside, allow it all to dry. And added embellishment, I am adding a laser cut maple leaf to all of these. It was such an easy project, and I think they turned out so well. I can't wait to use them for the fall season. So Pinterest was definitely inspiring me on this day when I chose to create all these fall sweater crafts. I had this pot in my stash and this wood bowl that I had thrifted, and they fit together perfectly. The pot was the perfect shape to create an acorn. You could just paint the pot, but I decided I wanted to cover the pot with a sweater sleeve. So I'm just going to use this brown one again. I love the flex in it. And I'm just measuring how much I need to make sure that I get proper coverage, and I will fold over the lip, at the top lip, and underneath. I'm going to slip that over now, and then I'm not folding it completely under on the pot here, and I'll show you why in a bit. But here I folded the sleeve into the pot and it's kind of tight, so I decided to go ahead and just create some slits, and then that would allow me to fit this top of the sleeve better on the inside. I'm just using some hot glue here, and then I'm going to press those flaps into place on the inside. You can also see I did wash the inside of my pot as well. So once you've got that all in place, you can flip it over, and then I'm just going to add some glue to the bottom here. I'm being quite generous just around the edge, and I'm just working in sections as well. So you can go ahead and add some extra glue where needed. For the extra stability, I'm using a wood slice on the bottom, and that will help it to sit better on the surface. I found that it really made a difference. So again, just use some hot glue for that. So I'm going to set that aside and now work on the top of our acorn. So I just needed to remove the tag here. Somebody suggested trying using a hot dryer here to remove any of the labels, but I think my label was just too old and dried out, so that technique didn't work for me, unfortunately, but I was able to scrape most of it off. I'm just going to use just some craft paint, and I'm just going to smear and dab and create kind of a grungy look for the acorn lid. So you can see there's still a shine. You could sand this down if you want, but I don't know, I thought I would try just putting the craft paint straight onto that shiny surface to see how it would look. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. Another thing you could do too is strip the coating and then stain the wood. That was definitely an option. But I was trying to make this as easy for me as possible. And sometimes just going in with some straight up paint, creating some texture and interest to the piece, and just seeing where you go with that. So I know sometimes craft paint doesn't always stick well to a shiny surface like this, but I've got a trick for you. Once this was fully dry, I took it outside and gave it a coat of some clear matte spray, and that helps to seal in the paint so it doesn't chip off. You can see how cool that looks. I love the grungy look of the lid. It looks like an old weather acorn that's been sitting out under the tree for a long time. I wanted this lid to be removable, so I thought it would be fun to use it as a little bit of storage. I wanted to add a stem to the top. I'm just using a piece of wood that I got from the dollar store. They have some great pieces all cut down. You can even get these at Dollar Tree. They are great for crafting. I'm using a combo of some E6000 and some hot glue to attach my stem. So then I've got a little handle to use to open this up and store some fun little goodies inside. If you don't have a pot like this, then you could use a clay pot. That would work as well, but I love how this turned out. I think it's such a fun piece. So this next one is my own creation. I had this wire leaf that I picked up a couple of years ago from Dollar Tree, and I also had this large scrap of sweater here. I'm going to go over the entire leaf with my fabric glue. Now, I should have used a stronger glue, maybe E6000, or I'm not sure if the Gorilla Glue fabric glue would have worked for this better, but this particular fabric glue, which I got from my local dollar store, was not enough. I lined it all, pressed my sweater into place, allowed it to dry overnight, and it lifted in a few spots. And as I worked on it, it came apart. But I have a fix for it, and I actually prefer the way it looks anyways with my fix. I tried to go in and add a bit more glue here and there to help and fix my mistake, but it still wasn't enough, and I will show you as I go. So I am going to cut around the leaf, and this is where I discovered that the glue was not holding to the wire form, and I should have known better, but you know, it was wishful thinking. I went for it anyways, and yeah, it was coming off. So I am going to continue to trim around this, but I'm only going to trim around it in sections. So what I decided to fix it with was some stitching. So I'm using some tapestry needles and I'm not sure what type of embroidery thread this is. It's like a yarn. I took this piece apart and it was pretty close to the color of the leaf frame. So I thought this would be a good choice. I just tied a knot and I threaded my needle, and then I'm going from the bottom up, and then I'm wrapping around the wire frame, coming up through the bottom again, and I'm just going to create a basic stitch going around, attaching the sweater to the frame. This worked really well. It did take me a while, but the effect actually turned out really, really well. I love the way it looked. You could attempt to use a sewing machine if you have a nice sturdy one that would go over the frame, but the hand stitch look actually looks really cool. You can see how it's looking so far. So again, like I said, I'm working in sections here because I didn't want this to completely come apart on me. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm trying to also preserve as much of the sweater scraps as possible because then it makes it easier to use them for some future projects. So I'm just going to continue work on this piece until I go all the way around. And if you need to extend your thread, I would just knot it off like I'm doing here. But again, that wasn't quite working for me. I should have gone in and just use some hot glue at the back, which I do end up using or doing, which I will show you. But my knot, I just couldn't get it tight enough without stretching the sweater. So I just made do though. I got to the end and I did run out here and there, so I had to just restart in spots. Here I'm just doing a basic X stitch over the wire, just again to help secure the middle portion of the frame to the sweater as well. So rather than ending with this knot, I'm just using some hot glue. I'm adding hot glue to the little knot that I had when I started. And then to finish it off, I just used the hot glue. I didn't bother knotting it at all. But you can see how cool that looks. Now I'm going to go ahead and just add some fabric glue along with some water and a paintbrush. And I'm going to seal all the edge. That will help secure my stitches and also help prevent the sweater from fraying. I'm going to go in and trim off any of the excess threads just to clean it up at the back. You can cover that back with fabric, but I chose not to. I'm using this for myself, so that part didn't bother me. I've got this branch that I had foraged. It's something, you know, I love to do, and I wanted to use this branch as a hanger. So I'm tying some jute twine to my branch, cutting a length off that is to the right length for me to hang this. So you can see I'm kind of hanging this kind of off to the side a little bit. I thought it created some interest to this. And then I'm going to use some hot glue. Once I've got the placement figured out, I'm just going to flip this around here and flip my stick around as well. And then I'm going to just use some hot glue to attach. I am also using just a little dab of hot glue on the knots to prevent those from coming apart. I'm using some jute twine to create a hanger as well. I'm just tying one end to the one end of the branch, and then I'm going to tie it on to the other side. And you want to make sure that you have got your twine on the right side of the little stick that's poking up. If you have one of those, at this point I didn't have it on the right side, but I corrected it by now. To adjust it so it hangs properly, I haven't glued on my hanger yet to the branch. So then what you do is just twist it into place, and that helps to secure it in place. So then it hangs right on your wall. It's such a unique piece. I think it turned out so well, and I absolutely love the stitching. I have this beautiful tablecloth that I picked up from HomeSense, and I've got a nice runner made out of linen draped in the center. So if you know me by now, I love to incorporate nature into my home. So I'm taking some branches that I had foraged, trimming them down, leaving some nice and long, and I'm going to just put them down the middle of my table. Now this is something that I absolutely love to do. I'm not going to be making an arrangement here that's going to be permanent. I'm just going to be creating one right here on top of the table. It's really easy to do, and I do it all the time. That way here you can reuse any of your items that you are going to be using today. I've got these leaves. I believe I picked these up from Michael's. I got them on a 2-for-1 sale. I'm just going to add those in. And then I've got these eucalyptus leaves that are in fall colors as well. I'm going to incorporate those into the center just so that color is spread throughout. These beautiful fall colored mums are nice golden yellow. I picked these up from Dollar Tree. I believe it was last year. Dollar Tree has really improved their florals. I'm so picky when it comes to my florals. And when I saw these, I was really impressed. I just removed a few of them, added them on either end and on either side. I also have these beautiful green hops, again from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to trim those down and incorporate some throughout. Now, as you can see, I'm only going to be trimming some of them off. That way here, if you again want to reuse these for anything, you still can. And then I'm just going to use some of these stems here and there and leaving them long. I'm trying not to cut anything down too much. That is the beauty of this, making it so you can reuse it anytime. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some more branches as needed. Something like this is all about layering, so you can go really crazy here if you'd like. If you have a really nice good base with the branches and some of those wire stems, you can see how you can nicely build things on top of each other. So now I'm going to add a bit more golden yellow, these again from Dollar Tree. Yes, Dollar Tree. And you're going to be hearing me say that a lot. Just again, trimming them down and incorporating them in, spreading the color throughout. So at this point, I thought I should probably break up some of the darker colors. So I'm adding these off-white wild roses. I think these ones came from Dollarama. I'm not 100% sure because I didn't have the tag left on them anymore, but I just cut those down and put those in. And now I'm going to add all these beautiful pumpkins. I am wanting to elevate some of them, which I will show you here in a minute. But what I did was placed one of these little wood stumps down, and then I just kind of placed the pumpkin on top. That helped to elevate it a little bit, and I'll show you that here in a second. And then I'm going to just go ahead and add my other ones in. Now, the two ceramic pumpkins, the two different colors, the green and the off-white, those ones are from Dollar Tree, and these fabric pumpkins are actually pumpkins that I had made. So I'm going to have the tutorial for that for you down in the video description as well as pinned in the comment section. So I'm going to now add some fairy lights. You could incorporate some battery operated candles throughout, but I love the beautiful glow and of fairy lights, and it just adds such a whimsical touch. Now at this point, I actually kind of wish I would have added a layer of lights underneath before I added all my stuff, but I just made do. So what you want to do is hide your battery pack, but making it still accessible. And then you're just going to weave those lights in and around. This is a silver strand. You can get these in copper, and I think I actually have seen them with a green wire now as well. So I'm just, like I said, weaving them in and out, lifting things up as I go, and I ended up using 2 strands of 30 lights. So I tucked those in and underneath as well. Here I'm adding some more branches. They're hemlock branches, and they've got such interesting texture. For another added natural touch, I'm incorporating some pine cones that I had foraged in different shapes and sizes. Now I'm going to work on my place setting. I'm just keeping it super simple because there's such a beautiful pattern on the tablecloth. I didn't add a placemat or anything. I just put a beautiful Dollar Tree fall napkin, cutlery, and a wine glass. This was such an easy tablescape to put together for the fall season. I am so excited for fall this year. It's been so hot in the summertime. I am definitely looking forward to these nice, cool temperatures and to get outside and do some foraging for projects like this. The evening glow is absolutely gorgeous. It just adds such a beautiful, cozy warmth to our home. I'm using this wood canvas panel, and it's an 8x10. I picked these up from a store called Dollarama here in Canada, but you can get these at craft stores, art supply stores. I've even seen them at Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using this upside down, and I'm going to be using the edge as my frame. I'm giving it a coat of cream. It's like a off-white craft paint, and it kind of gives it a bit of a whitewashed look. I'm just going to be doing the top and the sides. You can do the back if you'd like and the inside if you'd like, but I'm going to be trying something different. I'm going to be using some walnut stain I got from Deco Art, and I'm going to apply it with a paintbrush. I do that so I can get right up into the corners and the edges, and then I'm going to take a rag and remove the excess. So I typically also paint the inside edge of the frame of this piece, but this time around I decided that I'm going to be using my wood stain to apply that there instead, just to see what that would look like, and I actually really like the results. Using a paintbrush also helps control where you are applying the color as well. I'll use the end of the paintbrush to just wipe off any excess that may have built up in any of the edges and corners. I have this birch bark that I had foraged, and to get it nice and flat, I had dampened it a bit, or I possibly found it damp, and I placed it under some heavy boards and I allowed it to dry. I'm using a pencil and I traced out a shape that I'm going to be using as a mushroom stem, and then I'm just using some scissors to cut that out. It actually cut really easily because this birch bark is thinner. So I'm going to set that aside, and now I'm going to create my mushroom top. Again, I'm just using my pencil to trace that out, and you can use an eraser to erase any of your pencil marks that you may still be showing once you have this all cut out. You can leave these as is if you'd like, but I wanted to add a touch of some distress ink in Vintage Photo, and I'm going to just use a makeup sponge and apply it along the edge. This will create kind of some like dirt, as if you've just freshly gone and picked that mushroom. And I'm also going to apply some to the top of the mushroom just to help break up all that white color, and just again to create just some interest to the piece. Once you're happy with the application of all your ink color, you're going to use your hot glue gun and apply these pieces to the wood canvas board. You can butt it right up against the bottom edge if you'd like. You can add a touch of moss, branches, anything else that you'd like, but I just wanted to keep this piece nice and simple. I think it's a very, very effective piece. I love how it turned out. And it was actually very, very easy to make. So you could make several of these with different mushroom shapes, whatever you'd like. And you could use these as gifts. You can make them to sell, anything you'd like. I think it looks beautiful in my home fall decor. This next project is inspired by something I had seen on Pinterest. I took apart a cloche and I removed all the inside parts. I sprayed the base with oil rub bronze spray paint, and I'm going to just set that aside for now. I'm using this bird's nest I had found on the ground, and it had fallen apart, so I picked that up for use. I've got branches, I've got grasses, and some feathers. I picked up the feathers from a craft store. So I'm just taking a piece of the bird's nest here, and I'm going to just kind of shape it a bit back into the shape of a nest. Using some hot glue on the base, I'm going to press this nest into place. Now you could add a bit of glue to the bird's nest to make sure it holds together if you'd like, but it's going to be inside this cloche, so I wasn't concerned about it falling apart on me. Now for the embellishments. I'm going to start off with some branches. I'm just going to break a bunch of them down off of the stem, and then you want to just snip them down a bit so then they are going to fit underneath your cloche dome. So I just measured it, and then I'm going to continue to cut them down, and I'm just going to make sure again that it will fit. I'm just going to be using some hot glue on the tip, and then I'm going to place it inside the bird's nest. I'm going to hold it in place until the glue sets up a bit before I continue on. So again, like I said, this is something I had seen on Pinterest. It kind of reminded me a bit of like a specimen card, except this is like a specimen cloche. So I'm going to check again to make sure the dome fits over top of those branches, and then I'll know for sure the height I need to make everything else. So now I'm going to add some feathers. I did need to trim down these feathers quite a bit. I believe these particular feathers are some pheasant feathers. I'm not totally sure, but I like the different textures and on the feathers and the different little like the shapes and whatnot that are on the feathers as well. I thought that would add an interesting look. I'm going to add my grasses now. These are grasses that I had actually picked from my front yard, but you can go for a walk and gather up some grasses that you find out in nature. Of course, you can find some just along the sidewalk as well. I had these little pine cones that I had removed from the branches. I thought they would be a fun little touch, so I'm just adding those at the base. And then once you are happy with everything that you have, you can then put your cloche back into place. You can add anything that you'd like to something like this. I just think it was so effective and would make a beautiful piece for my fall decor. This next project is going to be an easy one. I have this frame from Dollar Tree and I found this skeletonized leaf in my mom's backyard. I had this piece of fabric that was on hand as well. I'm just going to be taking the frame apart. I needed to just be careful here because I had struggled with these little brackets, but I managed to get them off. And then I am also going to be using the glass for this. I needed glass from another frame. I found one that was the exact same size, so I grabbed that as well. I'm just going to use the cardboard insert and I'm going to use that as my template to cut out my fabric, so I knew that I had the right size, but I wanted it to be smaller because I wanted the glass to kind of frame around the fabric. So all I did was put a little cut into the fabric and then I tore it because I also wanted those nice frayed edges. So I'm just going to continue to tear this down until I get a size that I'm happy with that works with the leaf that I have. I'm going to start layering my pieces. So I put my fabric onto the one piece of glass and then I'm going to take my leaf and put that on and then grab the other piece of glass and put that on top. Of course, you want to make sure that your glass is all nice and clean. And then all you have to do is put this back into a frame that you want to use. I'm going to use this metal one again because I really like that gold look that's around it. And it just created a nice, super elegant, but yet very, very unique piece. And I was so happy that I was able to find a naturally skeletonized leaf to use for this project. Let me know what you think of this one. I recently went thrifting with my daughters and I found this wreath form that was only $1. It had been used before, but the glue bits that were left on here were really easy to remove. That's the thing I find about like twig wreaths or grapevine wreaths is that you can reuse them quite easily. I'm actually going to be using this flat on the table. I'm going to be making a candle wreath. So I'm going to add some Spanish moss here and I'm just going to use a little bit here and there all around, but I'm not fully covering the wreath. I want some of those branches to be showing through. So I'm just pulling the moss apart a bit, lifting it up and then adding hot glue and pressing the moss into place. You could use some preserved reindeer moss or some sheep moss as well if you'd like. I'm adding some branches. Again, I had foraged these. I find these ones on a walk whenever I go on the trails that are close to my home. I'm just adding some hot glue and just on the end, and then I'm just tucking those right into the wreath form under the moss. I like to use some branches that have got like different lichens growing on them and have like little branches offshooting or little nubs growing off of them, anything that you'd like, but I really like to use branches that have got some interest to them. I wanted wanted to add a little color. So I grabbed these pip berries that I had in my stash. I think I picked these up from Michael's like 3 years ago, but you can use pip berries from Dollar Tree or anywhere, or use any kind of berry that you'd like. I just trimmed them down, twisted them the way that I like, added some hot glue, and again, just tucked that into the wreath form. The nice thing about these stems is that they've got a little pine cone on them, as well as like a little fabric flower. It adds just the right touch of color that I wanted for this piece. So now I'm going to add some birch bark curls. I love to gather birch bark. There is a lot of it here where I live, and it falls naturally to the ground, and that's what I like to collect. A lot of times you'll find these little birch curls that are just on the ground or on a larger piece, and I just remove them, and they're perfect to add a little touch of birch bark to a project like this. So again, I'm going to be using my grass, but I also have this what's called sorghum. It's a type of grass that I had picked up from my local dollar store, and I really like it. I really like to use it for fall. It really adds a nice natural element and gives just a nice, like a different texture than just the grasses. So I'm just cutting off a little clump, trimming it down, adding some glue on the end, and then again just tucking that into the moss. I'll be doing the same thing with my grasses. Again, just trimming these down to more usable size so it'll fit nicely with my wreath. Going foraging or gathering items from your yard is a great way to save money for your crafting. I do it quite often, and I know a lot of you enjoy that as well. I'm using these hemlock pine cones. They are a nice small size, perfect for little crafts. So I'm just going to add several of these all over, and then you can add, again, anything you'd like. If you want to add some feathers, go right ahead. I'm just adding a hurricane vase and then a battery operated light, put that in place, and it's ready to be put on display. I think it is absolutely gorgeous. I have so many more fall craft ideas for you to check out in this playlist right here. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.